Um, Kevin, tell me about this 2,300-year flood out on Renard Creek and a 2,000-year flood here on Dry Creek. You said there's something that the public really needs to understand about that.
A lot of people hear the phrase 100-year flood, 1,000-year flood, and it's important to really understand what those mean in order to really apply it to everybody in the city. So it all depends on how much it rained, how long it took that rain to fall, and where that rain fell. And so there were parts of Travis County and Austin during the Halloween 2015 flood that the rainfall rates and the duration that that rain fell was like a 2,000-year storm. But that rainfall rate at those depths didn't happen across the entire city. So it would not be accurate to say that the entire city of Austin experienced a 2,000-year storm. There were just parts of the city and parts of the county that experienced it. And the most rainfall that we saw was in Dry Creek East, which is where we are. Airport saw 13 inches, nearing a 2,000-year rainfall rate. So a lot of the times those words get thrown out and people have a hard time understanding exactly what it means. Does that mean the entire city did? It's not necessarily everybody, but certainly the rates that we saw and the duration that those rates lasted produced what's looking like around a 2,000-year rain event.
And just so people don't have some people do have a misconception of a 2,000-year flood that's only going to occur once every 2,000 years. That's not what that means at all.
It is not what it means. It could happen again tomorrow. But the likelihood of that amount of rain falling again in that duration is extremely small. The design storm is what we call it for a 100-year flood. And when we start looking at designing for flood protection measures and maybe drainage design, we're talking about 100-year flood, 1% annual chance flood risk. And that's a design flood risk. And for this flood is more like a 0.04% chance rainfall for a 2,000-year rainfall event. So the likelihood is extremely small. And I talked to a lot of people at the town hall meeting last week and said to them, I'm not going to tell you that this will never happen again, but I can tell you that the likelihood of it happening is very small. It could happen though, so we can't say it will never happen again. That's not correct, but the likelihood of that amount of rain falling in that period of time is extremely small.
In 25 years, I think I've mentioned Dry Creek or Renard Creek, a couple of times, but 3 people died here in Dry Creek, not in Onion Creek, not in the Colorado River. That's really a lesson for everyone, isn't it?
It certainly is, and it's just a lesson that we try to impart on people, that you need to understand the flood risk to you and your property and your house and your family. And that can mean looking on a floodplain map and seeing where the floodplain is shown, but it could also mean if it gets bigger than that, where's the water going to go? If I live near a storm drain system and the water after the inlet may not be able to take more water or may get clogged, where's the water going to go after that? It's really a matter of understanding where is the water going to go if it gets larger than what's indicated on a map, or where the storm drain system may be able to take the water. So we had a lot of problems on Dry Creek East, which is where we're standing now. We had a lot of rain on Onion Creek. Onion Creek is obviously a bigger creek, it's a bigger channel, and we still have a lot of flood problems there. But some of the areas in this upper portion of Dry Creek, we have North Fork Dry Creek and South Fork Dry Creek, and they all combine into this area right here. Those areas saw some of the most intense amounts of rains, and a lot of the development in those areas were in the county, and so some of those areas really experienced not just a lot of water, but the rate that the water came was extremely fast. And so that's when a lot of people talk about the wave of water that might cause a flood, and that's when houses and walls can really start to get blown out and get moved, or we see a lot of issues with people in their cars getting swept away.
And just one final question. Talk to me about how the flood maps are going to change based on this storm, or are they going to change based on this storm?
So the city of Austin is really wrapping up a multi-year project to restudy floodplains for 7 watersheds throughout the entire city. One of them is Dry Creek East, which is where we are, and this includes a lot of areas in Travis County. And so the current floodplain map, the FEMA maps for this portion in Dry Creek East, shows what we would call an approximate study. It's a fairly old study, and it shows an approximate limits of the floodplain. Well, we've done an engineering analysis of the entire basin, and now we have detailed maps of where the 100-year and the 500-year floodplain limits will be. Now, we've gone through all the processes with FEMA to do the preliminary maps and respond to all the appeals and comments. And so the FEMA maps that will represent the new floodplain in all of Dry Creek East will be effective for flood insurance purposes on January 6th, 2016. Now, for regulatory purposes, which the City of Austin regulates flood development in the floodplain, we've been using this engineering information for a couple of years to regulate development, and that has affected some of these areas in Los Cielos.
So what that means for homeowners is that maybe in the past they didn't need to buy flood insurance or weren't required to, but now they might going forward.
Sure, and when people start hearing about flood insurance, it's important to understand that if someone has a federally backed loan and that property is located in a FEMA 100-year floodplain, then there is a requirement to have flood insurance on that property. However, a lender, federally backed or not, a lender can require the owner to purchase flood insurance because it's the lender holding the note for the property. And if they see that there's a risk that they're not comfortable with, they can require it. Anybody in the City of Austin, anybody in Travis County can buy flood insurance. You can buy it if you live on the top of a hill. And that's where it goes back to what we're talking about, is understanding your risk. Do I live near a 500-year floodplain? Do I live near a storm drain system that when it overflows is going to flow towards my house? Is there any way that I think that I might get flooded? If there's that chance exists, then we recommend people buy flood insurance. Now, if you live outside the 100-year floodplain, that insurance from FEMA is going to be relatively cheaper than obviously if you're in the floodplain because the risk is different. So it's again, back to understanding the risk, learning about the risk, and then planning accordingly to mitigate that risk.